have a quick chat, and then we'll talk about that defence video, and we'll maybe play that out. And then once they're actually live in the main stage, we'll flick over to the cameras, okay? Right, Wally, so where were we? We were talking about defence in general there, but as you mentioned, we're trying to do conferences to cover other topics. You mentioned the drugs one we did. We also did the food sovereignty one, hugely important topic. And of course, we've got COP26 coming up, so we've got plans for that as well, haven't we? Maybe doing stuff over a week.
Yeah. And that's it, the job of a campaigner is to speak to people who are soft-nosed and say to them, you've got to vote independence for a particular reason. And I think we're giving people the ammunition where we can say to them, look, I know you're deeply worried about drug deaths and drug policy in Scotland. Watch this series of talks on Independence Live. And hopefully we can kind of gently push people towards the sovereignty being an answer to some of these problems. Now, as we've said before, Kevin, there's loads that the Scottish Government, local authorities, and the health and mental health services can do at the moment, but we need to push people towards independence as a way to solve some of these problems. And the same for issues around nuclear defence. Or weapons of mass destruction, depending on what position you take on that, and the food sovereignty, and that was one of the ones we were most keen on discussing, was because we know that so many farmers voted no and would continue to vote no. We know the same around a lot of the fishing industry. So people are really worried about food and how the food sovereignty and food security of Scotland is likely to look in the coming years, and we can say to them, independence is an answer to this. And that's really what we've been trying to do this year. And as you said, coming up, climate, and I think that's one of the biggest things that people are going to be talking about in the next 12 months. And we can, every campaigner can say, if you're really concerned about the climate, Scotland will make a much bigger impact into the net zero and all of our carbon targets as an independent nation. And that's almost kind of inarguably that's the case. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and we're giving people the resources on the channel, I hope. So please let us know in the comments if this is proving useful, if there's anything else you want us to cover. But I know we're going to focus mainly on Trident today, but I do think it's worth saying to people, this is what we're doing and why we're trying to do it, and what else the movement want us to do.
Absolutely. It's good to explain ourselves, what we're actually about. And it's just not turning up, at Faslane and live streaming stuff. We've got all these other things that we are doing. So just to give you an update again, they're still waiting for speakers to turn up. It's not started yet. So I'm currently looking at the main camera, and it's an empty stage at the moment. Okay, so hopefully that will change soon. It could be it's a half-one start, right? So what we could do, Willie, is play this video. I don't know if you want to explain it again, and I'll play it out, okay?
Yeah, sure. So we ran an In Defence of Scotland event, and it was primarily around how we persuade current members of the armed services and also veterans to consider voting yes. And when we started with those discussions, we got into a lot more policy areas, and we ended up with Trident. And we know that not only a majority of yes voters want to get rid of Trident, a majority of voters in Scotland want to get rid of Trident, but a really important point is that the majority of people on this planet want a nuclear-free world. And this is a brilliant way for Scotland to garner international support, is by going down this route and saying this one thing, the top thing that Scotland will do as an independent country is to stop being the home for nuclear weapons. And that is a sure way to get international recognition, support for what we're trying to do as an independent nation, because it's only the 7 or 8 countries who've got nuclear weapons who are in support of them. Everyone else, the other nearly 200 countries, are not in support of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really do have to think about this. And for me, this has got to be, I think as Isabel Lindsay described it, this has got to be a triple red line, that Scotland, when it's independent, gets rid of nuclear weapons according to the timetable that's kind of roughly around 3 to 5 years. And that's a triple red line. And that's where we start negotiating from, making sure that that's completely separate. And I'm sure a lot of the speakers will say something similar today. And I think that view is shared right across the movement and right across the country. So this panel session Bob Fotheringham, Bill Ramsey, Isabel Lindsay and Janet Fenton. A wonderful 30 minutes that really covers why we need to remove Trident, but also the how. And at the end of it, I found it really fascinating, but at the end of it, you could see that there was a roadmap and you could see there was international support for Scotland when it wants to get rid of Trident. So a really, really valuable and worthwhile chat for as long as you need to play it until you can go live on stage.
Right, folks, as Willie just said, we'll play this video and we'll interrupt it when the cameras are live. Okay, right, here we go. But thanks again, Willie.
Now we're going to look at, I think, the most important aspect within our defence, security and protection, the idea of the nuclear weapons stroke Trident that we currently have. So we've got a fantastic panel with us to cover that.
Hello.
Hi, Bob, and also Janet. And Isabel and Bill.
Hi there, my name's Bob Fotheringham. I'm a socialist and I'm here on behalf of Now Scotland, new grassroots organisation that's been set up to give the rank and file, if you like, of the independence movement a say. My view on nuclear weapons is that they are destructive and indiscriminate, and I oppose them on that basis. They are costly, the money may be better spent on other projects, socially useful projects. And in terms of Scotland, it's undemocratic. The major political representatives in Scotland or in the Scottish Parliament oppose nuclear weapons, and so their siting in Faslane and Mclean is something that I believe is opposed by the majority of people in Scotland, and they should be removed.
So that's where I stand on nuclear weapons. All of them.
Fantastic.
Not just
and Isabel?
Yes. This would be Scotland, an independent Scotland's opportunity to make a really substantial contribution internationally if we removed these weapons. And of course, in so doing so, we would, of course, make it very difficult for the UK to continue as a nuclear power. So it's a wonderful opportunity for Scotland to do something that is positive and constructive. There are really only two things on the horizon that could present a truly existential risk to the survival of human civilization. One is nuclear weapons, the other is climate change. Scotland needs to prioritise both of these.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm convener of SNP CND, which is it's a group within Scottish CND where members of the SNP can come together and network and take things forward. Our recent focus has been on Trident removal, surprise, surprise. In the SNP's 2019 conference on motion on a roadmap of Trident removal was passed unanimously. Our next step is to take forward a motion. We'll put it together on a timescale for Trident removal. That will be underpinned by the frameworks for nuclear weapon removal laid out in the new treaty on the removal of nuclear weapons, the TPNW, which became international law in January of this year. One of the most exciting developments in the world in relation to the anti-nuclear movement, and in the view probably of everybody here. Every SNP parliamentarian, both in Holyrood and Westminster, has signed up to the ICAN TPNW parliamentary pledge, along with all of, and that's in both Westminster and in Holyrood. All of the Greens, both in Westminster and Holyrood, have done the same. And as far as I'm aware, some Labour MSPs have done so. And I think possibly some Labour MPs down in Westminster may have done so as well. So our focus from an SNP CND point of view is to take forward and try and expand on existing SNP policy, which is already a roadmap and Trident was passed unanimously, as I said, in the conference in 2019. And in the next opportunity, we intend to take forward something on timescales. Thanks.
Bill, picking up from the TMPW, What is the kind of likely timescale of removal? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that was kind of covered in that agreement.
It's not. The timescale is still to be within the TPNW, and Janet actually she's the Scottish representative in ICANN, and we'll be able to say a bit more about that. But as of this moment in time, a timescale in terms of TPNW is still to be fleshed out. We had, before the TPNW became law, we were looking at a timescale of between 3 and 5 years, and that sort of fits within the TPNW rubric. But maybe we can get into some more detail on that. On relation to the TPNW and its workings, as I say, the Scottish Government would, when it became independent, it would become a signatory. It would ratify the TPNW. 54 countries currently ratified it, and that's growing because over 100, and Janet will remind us, 160 or whatever it was, actually put the process in motion. But then we would have the resources of the United Nations institutions that would become involved in helping Scotland and the remainder of the UK remove a trident from Scotland. For instance, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that would be one of the institutions that would be involved.
Well, that's really interesting. So this kind of really daunting task that we were kind of covering so far, there would be help from other institutions. And I would almost say it looks like we've got a bit of a roadmap towards that as well with the treaty. Janet, could I bring you in to expand on that?
Yeah. Yes, if I could please, just to say that the most significant thing about the getting rid of the weapons is that would not be determined if we accede to the treaty, if an independent Scotland accedes to the treaty, and it would mean that the timescale would be determined by the first meeting of state parties, which is going to happen in January. That's the first meeting of the countries that have fully ratified the treaty. And there are discussions going on at the present time about what would be required for removal. And John's paper is definitely one of the things that's being considered by the international community and the experts and academics looking at that, because his document deals with removal, which is slightly different from destruction, which is what the treaty would require us to do. But it wouldn't require Scotland to do that because they're the UK's weapons. We could insist that they were removed immediately within a removal framework, which at the moment is looking like being a maximum of 5 years for any country, with a 10-year window for actually taking the things so completely apart that they could never be reconstituted as a nuclear weapon. So coupled with the fact that the UK government doesn't have anywhere else to put them, Scotland's acceding to the treaty, an independent Scotland acceding to the treaty, or even a pre-independent Scotland absolutely committing to that, really gives the UK government cause to recognise that its nuclear weapons are on a sugary nail. And I mean, this is something that the whole world wants. We had a very interesting meeting with an Irish parliamentarian at the cross-party group on nuclear disarmament in the Scottish Parliament. And they passed the terms of the treaty into their national legislation unanimously, both the lower and the upper house. It was unanimous. And our parliamentarians were pretty gobsmacked by that and said, how did you get it through? How was it unanimous? How did you manage that? And the guy just said, nuclear weapons, it's a no-brainer. They don't, you know, it's only in countries that actually have nuclear weapons that anyone is convinced that they have any functionality whatsoever. They're just unbelievably dangerous.
I would say that it's all right to say the UK's nuclear weapons, if Scotland demanded removal, wouldn't have anywhere else to go. This is the case, which makes the situation of the UK state desperate to ensure that doesn't happen. So we have to be aware of that. And we all know that in any negotiations, if you sense that the other side has a bit of flexibility, that there's a bit of movement there, then you really ramp up the pressure. You ramp up the bribery, you ramp up the threats, and Scotland would experience this from the rest of the UK and from NATO. But if you're absolutely clear that the other side is completely rigid and firm, you recognise you're on to something which you're not going to win. And therefore you don't put the same effort in, which is why it's so, so important that our timescale, our programme for this is very clear, and we make it clear to all that this is a triple red line.
Has anyone worked out the UK's likely negotiating position to the Trident issue in the event of a yes vote in the future referendum, and how strongly the issue will figure in the UK's behaviour leading up to a referendum? And Bill, would you like to come in on that one?
Well, where they are is basically considered confidential and a state secret. They're not going to release their hand, though I did take part in a recent RUSI seminar, and I put the following question. It was done under Charterhouse rules, so you're not meant to say who said what and all the rest of it, and I will stick to that because I will be attending other seminars in the future. And I put the following question. Every professional navy in the world does contingency planning in terms of alternative basing. Are you telling, does contingency planning take place in relation to Britain's nuclear, the Trident fleet, in fact, all its assets? And the question was then put to the speaker in the panel, who will remain nameless. But the moderator from RUSI confirmed that point even before I put the question, that contingency planning is part of their processes. That was a response I got from them. So I must assume, therefore, that they were not telling a porky. Maybe someone was, maybe two folk were. But I can only give you what I was truthfully told. Well, what I was told.
That would be good. Sorry, it's difficult when it's things you're very familiar with. John's paper is John Ainsley's paper on the removal of Trident. It's called Nowhere to Go. It's available on the Scottish CND website, and it's a very carefully researched and conservative estimate of how long it would take to get rid of Trident from Scotland. And it's accepted as an authoritative estimate at an international level. So that's what John's paper is. The point I wanted to make about NATO is actually in relation to two reports that ICANN have just in the last week or so produced. One is on spending on nuclear weapons, which, as everyone knows, is astronomical. But one of the things that is particularly notable from that report is the amount of spending that nuclear weapons producers, spend on lobbying governments and on independent think tanks. And I can't remember because I'm not very good at statistics, but the figure that is given to RUSI runs into absolutely enormous amounts of money that are paid to RUSI by nuclear weapons producers. And I think it's very important to be aware of that. And I'm very grateful to ICANN for producing this report. And you can access that on the ICANN website or on the Scottish version, which is nuclearban.scot. But the other report that they've just produced is a report on NATO in relation to its own objectives. And I mean, all the way through the negotiations for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, there was huge opposition from the US government, along with the other nuclear-armed states. And a lot of that was expressed in rhetoric around NATO, which has a nuclear-armed policy. but it is only a policy. It's not in the treaty. It's not an essential part of how NATO operates. Now, personally, I have a problem with military alliances which are not democratically controlled, of which NATO is definitely one of. But aside from that, there is absolutely no reason and everything in NATO's own stated objectives to suggest it should now be thinking about ceasing to be a nuclear armed state. If you're operating in a world where there are countries that are already bound by the terms of the treaty, and you're looking at international financing and resourcing, it's crazy to be doing something that you may find yourself in a litigious, difficult situation in one country as opposed to another.
A question from our audience then, from building onto your point there, Janet, is it feasible and or realistic that Scotland can remove nuclear weapons and stay in NATO? Do you just want to very briefly give me a yes or no, the four of you?
So I think the answer to that is that I don't want, for other reasons, to be in NATO. But I think if Scotland, before applying for NATO membership, had got that agreement and started the process of removing nuclear weapons, then I don't think there would be a rejection of Scotland's application for NATO membership for other reasons, because it's an organisation, like so many organisations, that wants to expand and develop, see this as part of its strength. So in that sense, I don't think it would. Morally, I think there are other issues, as long as the key dominant players of NATO and in its policy was nuclear related. But just one point I would quickly like to put in, because it's one that will come up, will be used against us in any independence campaign, is that there are not many Scottish jobs that are Trident dependent. The warheads are built in Burfield, down in the south of England. It's in Barrow that the submarines are built. The Trident missiles themselves come from the United States, go back there for servicing. So there is really comparatively little by way of jobs in Scotland. And there are more around the other UK submarines. That's the Astute class and others, which are going to be increasing in number under existing plans. That is another issue that will have to be dealt with. But Faslane can be used as a military centre by an independent Scotland.
As I say, I think the key is stay, because we would, if an independent Scotland would, as Isabel says, apply to become part of NATO on its own terms, and could do so with its own terms and conditions. The paper that I referred to, that ICANN have produced, is aimed at countries that are already in NATO and how they can attempt to negotiate with NATO that they give up their nuclear weapons. That's the direction of travel. So a new country coming into membership of NATO would very easily be able to make that a term and condition of membership. Like Isabel, I think it would be a retrograde step, and it would tie Scottish security to allies that are not necessarily likely to share our wish to contribute to the international peace movement, rather than an aggressive expansion and control of countries.
Back to that original group of people who started the fight against nuclear weapons. There's a bit of a departure for All Under One Banner to have a demonstration around something like nuclear weapons. I want to say a couple of words about that. We've normally demonstrated around the question of independence, and this is also about independence. It's not been buried here, but it's also about the issue of nuclear weapons. And there's really, I want to highlight two reasons for it. One is the sighting of these nuclear weapons on the Clyde close to a big conurbation in Glasgow is a disgrace. These are weapons of mass destruction. They are indiscriminate. And it's a disgrace that they're sited here in the west of Scotland. And I'm for, and we're all for, the end of nuclear weapons. Full stop. But we also want Scotland to be rid of them as well. That's the second reason. This is about democracy. The Scottish government do not support nuclear weapons in Scotland. The mass of the population are opposed to it. They're imposed here by the British state. And it's one of the reasons why we want independence. This goes to the heart of the type of Scotland that we want. A Scotland that's open, that's inclusive, that's peace-loving, that opposes war, that opposes imperialism. So, it's a departure, but I think it's an important one to put a message out about the type of country we want when we become independent. Okay, so I think I've said enough. So the first speaker is going to be Isabel Lindsay from CND. I think Lynn Jameson from CND is going to say a few words along with that. On you go, Lynn.
This over here is the face of the British state. 180 nuclear bombs. Just imagine the utter horror and devastation that that could involve for so many millions throughout the world. But that's not enough for the British government, because they have just announced that they're going to be increasing the warheads to 240, despite the fact that this is a denial of what they signed up to, the limited amount they signed up to in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So you have to say why. We know it is nothing whatsoever to do with our safety or our security. It is everything to do with projecting the image as they see it and the power of the British state, because they are still under the illusion that they are major players in the international scene. And this is the main thing they have to hold on to convince themselves that that is still the case. But it has always been the case. When we go back to the Attlee government in 1946, took the decision in secret to start the development of the British bomb. It was Ernest Bevin, the Foreign Secretary at the time, said, we've got to have a British bomb and we'll have a big Union Jack all over it. I think that tells us what this is about. And it is about that projection of state power, that illusion of state power, because it is an illusion, because it isn't the British state. It is very much the United States who are in control here. The UK is totally dependent on the US for their missile system. And this goes way back to before 61 to 60 and just before that, because Britain had nuclear warheads. But so they had to go, Macmillan had to go cap in hand to the Americans and say, please, 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 can we have your Polaris? And the American response was, yes, possibly, but we want the Holy Loch base. Now, Britain, in the form of Harold Macmillan, pleaded and pleaded with them, please have Loch Linnhe instead, because there are just a few easy to handle Highlanders up there. We might have big, big problems with Glasgow, so there you are. At least that was recognized. The Americans were absolutely certain they wanted the Holy Loch, and the Holy Loch it had to be, and Britain did get its leased Polaris submarine, and now its leased Trident missile system, and the Trident missile system that goes back regularly to the United States in order to be serviced And I don't think anyone has any doubts at all for the targeting to be developed there and the control. So it is an illusion. It is an enormously expensive illusion. Now, we can be under no doubts whatsoever that in the negotiations for independence, everything will be done. Everything will be thrown at us. There will be threats, there will get people so committed. And let's understand, this is not technically a difficult thing to get rid of.
I'm with Independence Live. I'm currently on a live stream right now. Would you be up for interviewing?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Yep, that'd be fine. I'll just take you over here.
Access, which we produced during the referendum to show the technical processes for getting rid of nuclear weapons here. And our report, Trident, Nowhere to Go, showed how important what we do here in Scotland.
So, I'm Jem from Independence Live, and can I ask what your name is, please?
My name is John Andrews.
And where are you, like what organisation, or do you just represent yourself?
Faslane Peace Camp.
Oh, cool! Yeah, that's cool. Like, we love the peace camp here. So, Faslane's, you know, it's not all new news to you. Like, you're very well aware. So, this probably is a very easy question to ask. So, why are you here today?
I would say the reason why I ended up at the peace camp in general, because I'm one of the more new people, is because of the lie of the British government to do with the nuclear weapons. Obviously, we're working against nuclear weapons, but with them saying that they have, well, I think we have 190 now.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be increased to 180, but instead they're increasing to 260. It's just more lies of the government, so it needs to be protested. You know, people should be doing everything they can.
And I see you've got some leaflets there. Can we just see one?
Of course, yeah. So
that's Faslane's Peace Camp, and there's some information for you guys there. So look up that. But so what's driven, like what made you think in your life, like what changed your perspective on nuclear weapons and such like that? Like,
it wasn't a change of perspective, it was more of an awakening as to what I could do personally about that. And obviously with COVID, I think a lot of things will have changed for a lot of people. Certainly changed for myself. I ended up moving back with my parents the first time in a long time. I wasn't working the first time since I was about 18.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of time to think and read and that sort of thing, and more and more it just seemed I needed to do something. And a friend of mine happened to be here. I know him through doing musical things. He was here going to the so it's good to have your energy here, and I haven't left because it was important and that good. It wasn't actually very well publicised. A friend of mine was actually still in jail from a Ross Day on August 6th. We came in a direct action and held the traffic up for about 4 or 5 hours here.
Wow.
Which wasn't very well publicised. I don't know why, but so I'm still on bail.
Well, that's why Indie Live Media believes in being the media, so we don't want like the BBC and all that to just everybody a chance from any side of the story, a chance to speak and be the way that media should have been, and that's unbiased. So we want to be the fair represent. We want to get everybody's point of view. We want to get everybody's side, and we want to make sure that the truth is out. So, what age, if you don't mind, what age demographic are you in?
Oh, I'm 36.
Right. So, would you say that your generation and the generations that came after you, do you think they're more into protesting, or do you think there's still some improvement with it?
What I've noticed since I've been here is that there's people that are maybe about 10 or 15 years older than me, most of the people that we see actually coming down here doing things.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there aren't young people involved, but they seem to be mostly to do with exile when they do come up here, which is a bit more rarely. But it seems that it's more kind of media driven.
So you've got the upgraded model.
Direct action and stuff like that. And it seems to me that it's more of a cool thing, exile. And the C&D side of things is forgotten about. For me, it's not nuclear exclusive.
Yeah.
You know, we won't have a climate if the nuclear bomb goes off, and we won't have anywhere to keep the nuclear bombs if we don't have a climate. So it's kind of like we need to be attacking it from all angles.
So do you believe that the younger generation is using mostly online presence more than physical presence?
They do use online presence more, but I also believe it's a false reality which isn't actually representing what happens in the real world.
Yeah.
And you can say a lot of things to whatever source groups you have on a platform, and it changes nothing.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel better. That's the problem is it makes you feel better about nothing. So people need to be getting out and doing things absolutely directly.
Oh, sorry.
All of you here today because we do need to say it loudly and clearly that there is no moral case for Trident.
Yeah, you just pick one up.
There is no economic case for Trident, and there is no military case for Trident. It is the norm in the world to be nuclear free. It is the exception to the rule to possess nuclear weapons. And yet, as we've heard from Isabel Lindsay and CND, the UK government behind us is increasing the number of nuclear weapons on the Clyde. What message does that send to countries across the world? How can we expect nations to disarm or not to arm if we send the message that the only way that we can protect our security is to possess nuclear weapons? Trident, of course, are yesterday's weapons, and even then they failed to protect and they failed to deter a single conflict. They are completely redundant in today's world. Cyber attacks can't be deterred by Trident. Terrorism can't be deterred by Trident. Future pandemics can't be deterred by Trident. The climate emergency can't be deterred by Trident. These are the global issues that we face, and nuclear weapons play no role whatsoever in ensuring that we have a resilient state, a resilient country. And you know, I hear the likes of the UK Chancellor, the billionaire UK Chancellor, say that we can't afford the £20 uplift to universal credit. Well, let me offer up a suggestion. Stop funding redundant nuclear weapons and start investing in the people of our country who need it most. And as for Scottish Labour, you know, the deputy leader of the Scottish Labour Party, a great defender of weapons of mass destruction, she describes our opposition to nuclear weapons as gesture politics. Well, I don't know about you, but I call it principled politics, ethical politics, compassionate politics, rational politics. Gesture politics is when you waste billions on a status symbol that will never be used, purely influence on the world stage. That, my friends, is gesture politics. And talking of world stage, I have been reflecting on the horror that is unfolding as we speak in Afghanistan. And we need to do everything we can to bring as many people as possible to safety. But what is happening in Afghanistan is not only a shameful betrayal, it is the biggest foreign and defence policy failure of recent times. And the British state must reflect and act upon those failures. I believe independence gives Scotland the opportunity to build an alternative foreign and defence policy that moves away from the imperial bluster of the British state, which has failed time and time again. A foreign policy that respects international law, a foreign policy that respects human rights, that builds a compassionate asylum system, a Scotland that reprioritises our conventional defence, which has been cut to the bone by this UK government to pay for Trident. So I say this, In the first 100 days of independence, we must kickstart the process to remove these unlawful weapons from our soil. And we will ensure that Faslane thrives as a fit-for-purpose, non-nuclear base, retaining the jobs and the talent that already exist to support the communities of this area and beyond, because I'm sick to death of hearing from the likes of Scottish Labour and the local MSP that we would close this base. Absolutely not. We will ensure that the talent remains, but we will have no nuclear weapons on our soil. With independence, we'll be able to shift the debate on Trident. It won't any longer be about its relocation or about its renewal. It will be about getting rid of it once and for all. That's what independence will do. So let me conclude by just sending a heartfelt message to the Yes Movement, all of the Yes Movement. Now is the time for us to unite, to work together, as we did in 2014. That's why I'm here representing the SNP today, and I know that there are many speakers representing lots of different organisations and groups, but now is the time for us to unite, as we did then, to create the nuclear-free independent Scotland we know is possible, and it's up to us to make that happen. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to introduce Jerry Cairns, speaking in a personal capacity, obviously about what we all know.
Sisters and brothers, thank you very much for the invitation to be here this afternoon. Our opponents like to disparage what we're about. They disparage us by saying it's a constitutional issue. You know, why do we waste time on constitutional questions? It's no such thing. What we are about and why we are still here is because there is a great question that has been unanswered since 1707, the 19th century. And there's only one answer to that question. It's not devolution, it's not home rule, it's not federalism. It's as the Honourable Rory Erskine of Mar said, it's the resumption of Scotland's national independence. That is the key and the only answer to that national question. But there's more to that, because as James Connolly, the Edinburgh-born socialist and Irish Republican, and John Mclean understood as well, that the national question is linked to the social question. The two are two sides of that one coin. Because the thing is, brothers and sisters, independence could be the most exciting thing, or it could be a damp squib. A damp squib where flags come down, Prince Charles officially announces that the clock's been turned back to 1603. That's not my vision of an independent Scotland. And I'm here to give a wee plug for my book on Rory Erskine of Mar, because he actually challenged the Home Rulers, because Scottish nationalism was stuck in a dead end that was about Home Rule and devolution, relying on the Liberal and Labour parties to deliver something that they could never deliver. The only ones that can deliver are the people of Scotland themselves. So for the great changes that we want to see in this country, to get rid of those weapons of mass destruction, to give Scotland a say in matters of war and peace, to turn Scotland upside down in terms of our society, solve the land question once and for all, and protect our indigenous languages of Gaelic and Scots, there's only one way to do that, and that is the resumption of our national independence. And a good starting point in terms of doing something different is that when people land at Glasgow or Aberdeen or Inverness airports, when they come off the boat at Greenock or Leith, or when they drive over the border, they will see a sign that will be quite visionary, and a starter for 10 for the country we want to build. Fáilte de Fóblach na Hálapa. Welcome to the Republic of Scotland. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Could Mohammed? Oh, here he is. Cool. Hi, just
yes.
Say to everybody, the next speaker is Mohammed Asif, who is here on behalf of the Afghan Human Rights Campaign and also a campaigner against war. Now, we've heard the disaster of Afghanistan and what's happened in Afghanistan and what's going on there. And Mohammed could talk about that from personal experience. And it's good to hear that the Scottish Government and the SNP are opposed to what's happened there. But people should remember, and it's why it's important when we need to campaign, at the time the troops went in, the Scottish National Party supported that when they went into Afghanistan. So we have to remember that. It's good that they've taken a critical position now, but it's a reason why we need to campaign and keep on the streets. Mohammed, thank you.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. I remember many of my friends here in the year 2001 when we started to campaign against the war criminal Tony Blair in Glasgow. When the war in Afghanistan happened, we were told by Tony Blair personally and George W. Bush that they will not walk away from us. This is his exact words. They will not abandon us. 20 years later, what Britain and America did was replace Taliban with Taliban. You know, you have seen the miseries around, England and, meeting soldiers and others. I want Boris to meet the children of Scottish soldiers who went to Afghanistan. I want Boris to meet the 200,000 or 300,000 Afghans who were vanished with these weapons behind us. I want Boris and others that what are you going to tell them? What is your answer? Brothers and sisters, my heart really bleeds for Afghanistan. And it is when we were saying that we need a political solution in Afghanistan, we were told by the war criminal Tony Blair and others that no, we have to remove the Taliban, they're a terrorist. Let me tell this, that there is no doubt the Taliban are terrorists, no doubt about it. They're a bunch of barbaric killers and vicious human beings, but who empowered them? Think about this. When we were fighting the USSR in the 80s, trust me, Britain and America trained Bin Laden soldiers in their army, or the Mujahideen, or the British and American give them a holy title, the holy warriors. But when they achieve fighting the Russian or the Red Army, then suddenly the holy warriors or the pious people become the terrorists. Some of their soldiers were trained in Scotland in the 80s, in England, in America, and many other Western countries. But when the Red Army was defeated, with the loss of 1.5 million Afghans in Afghanistan, fighting your war, the Cold War, remember? And then you abandon Afghanistan, with your friends whom you call terrorists later on. Bin Laden and others who were recruited from the 80s. I tell you this, I remember a refugee camp in Pakistan when Ronald Reagan advisor visited that refugee camp and he was chanting Allah Akbar, God is great, with the Afghans in the refugee camp. He went to the border with the Afghan refugees and he said, that's your land. Your land is occupied by infidels. Reclaim your land. As that Brzezinski, the security advisor to Ronald Reagan, and he was a very pious Muslim, as though he was really a good Muslim. But he was telling us that God is with us and reclaim your land. Brothers and sisters, when we see, the scenes in Afghanistan, coming out of Afghanistan, it's heartbreaking. The Taliban, it's impossible for Taliban to occupy a country within a week or 9 days. But this was a pre-planned strategy by Boris and others, to collapse Afghanistan and go into, further chaos. Brothers and sisters, in the past 20 years, nearly 180,000 innocent Afghans killed, 72,000 Afghan security forces killed, 400 or 500 British soldiers, including the Scottish kids. My sympathy and condolences with their parents and families. But I think if I'm the family of a Scottish soldier right now, I will be suing Boris in the MOD, because you send my children to fight the terrorists and the same terrorists you empowered them 10 days ago. Brothers and sisters, you know, these are not needed, as the previous speaker said. There's a lot of poverty in the world. You know, in Afghanistan, 22 million right now, according to United Nations, do not have food. And we have these weapons of mass destructions. You know, I don't know, the maintenance bill is, I think, few $100 billion every year. And this is only killing innocent citizens. When we were told that they will liberate Afghanistan and liberate the women of Afghanistan, I laugh. Right now, if you tell any Afghans, I have the pictures and the messages, that the screaming, the cries, if you want, I can play it in my language, that tell your Western friends that you betrayers and you sold us, you tied our hands and you threw us in the sea. You know, if you listen to their voices and their screams, probably, you know, Kabul is nothing. You know, there's like maybe 100,000 people gathering. You know, when you have this guilty feelings, Boris and others, that we have failed in Afghanistan, you know, let's take 20,000 Afghans. So that can justify their failures in Afghanistan. Brothers and sisters, the biggest non-nuclear weapons was dropped in Afghanistan. And it killed innocent people. They call it the mother of all bombs, or the mother of Americans, I don't know what you call it. And many weapons from this part of the world shifted to Afghanistan. You know, killed innocent women and children in dawn raids, in, you know, night raids, and other aerial bombings. You know, hundreds of thousands innocent Afghans killed by American and British bombings, by the Taliban, by the Islamic State, by the Afghan security forces. But just last week, the world washed their hands from Afghans. And now, if you listen to the UK Defense Chief, you know, it is a dirty game. Politics is very dirty, but I'm glad there are a few politicians who are still clean. You know, when the Defense Chief came on Sky Television and Kay Burley asked him, that the enemy, and he jumped in, oh, please don't call the Taliban our enemy. They're not our enemy. They're changed. I haven't seen a Taliban leader growing a tail or extra ears. You know, they're the same barbaric killers who kill us before 9/11. Because before 9/11, it wasn't your interest, because they were only killing the Afghan culture. But when 9/11 happened, suddenly they realized that there is a group called Taliban. You can Google yourself. A Mexican journalist asking George W. Bush when he was running for presidential, when he was a candidate for the US presidency, he asked him if he knew Taliban. He thought the Taliban were a musician and they are a band of musicians. This is his answer. You can Google and see it. When he was asked where Chechnya was, he didn't know where Chechnya was. And he told the journalist, that's not my job. It's your job to know where which country is. So that is the sort of politicians. When millions of people were marching against the Iraq war, and I was myself with many of my colleagues here in the crowd, when we were telling the war criminal Tony Blair and others that the war in Iraq is illegal, we were told by the Sun newspapers and the craps and the rubbish and the garbage that we are 45 minutes away from a nuclear attack by Saddam Hussein. When everybody, the UN and everybody was saying this is an illegal war, and Tony Blair killed, along with George W. Bush and others, 1 million Iraqis. They have blood on their hands, brothers and sisters. You know, I'm standing here, you know, when I speak, I get a lot of problems personally. Recently, I traveled and I was stopped at the airport under the Terrorism Act, and they told me, you know, we're stopping you because under this legislation. I must be the laziest terrorist on earth, you know, the very lazy terrorist on earth, that I live in Scotland for 21 years or 21 and a half years, that I haven't done anything for the terrorists. You know, that proves you. Imagine if you are working for your boss and you don't turn up without letting your boss, do you really think you will survive in your job? You know, that's the sort of punishment that when we speak against the war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Yemen, where these weapons in Yemen, you know what is happening in Yemen. You know, children and women, most of the victims there are killed by these weapons exported from here, and they are killed. You know, when we raise our voices, you know, that Saudi Arabia is killing Yemenis, you know, we are told, you know, we are terrorist sympathizers. You know, they're your friends. Saudi is a terrorist regime, which is your friend. You dine with them, you wine with them, You know, you have parties with them. You were the first after 9/11 to take out their families and give them safe passage from America and Britain so people don't hurt them. So you are their friends. You know, you empower every rogue regime, every dictators, every warlords, every fascists and racists around the world. You empower them. When you are telling us that is your war and go and fight against the Red Army, you know, we were killed 1.5 million. 7 million Afghan become refugees. You know, probably about 7 more million across the world. But brothers and sisters, we have to come together. We have to fight for humanity, because this is not the solution. This is, you know, causing more killings, causing more destructions, and this has to stop. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Neil Mackay is going to give you a couple of tunes now. Then we'll have Bill Ramsey, I think. No, then we'll have Lorna McKinnon after that. Okay, take it away.
Hello everybody, I've got a few songs for you all. First up's John Mclean March by Hamish Henderson. Most of you should know.
And the hill city's turning it, we're all sure he'll win back to Glasgow today. The Ginas and Hodders on are marching for Clydebank. Come on down and see him, he'll be a throng to bind. Come on, Jock and Jimmy, leave the crans and the muckle gantries. Great John Mclean's coming home to the Clyde. Argyle Street and London roads, the route that we're marching. The lads frae the Brimalon, they're here to a man. Hey Neil, where's your drums? You big heeling chichter, get your pipes made and march at the head of the clan. Hello, Pat Maloney, I knew you'd be here, son. The blue and the green, my lad, will wear side by side. For the Gorbals is his today, and Glasgow belongs to him. Great John Mclean's coming home to the Clyde. It's forward to Glasgow Green, we'll march in good as well. That boy isn't to blame. Hey look man, there's Johnny now, that him. And all lead next is tag tens when he's speaking, but you'll mind what I said here in Glasgow City and the hill well beside. Oh look, man, the scarlet's bonny, here's to your heel and shonny. Great John Mclean's coming home to the Clyde. I will when it's finished, I'm a walking to Springburn. Come home to your tea, John, we'll soon hae you fed. It's hard work this speaking, I'm sure he'll be tired tonight. asleep on the flare mac and gauge on the bed. The whole city's quiet now, it kens that he's resting at home with his Glasgow friends, their fame and their pride. Oh, the red will be won, my lad, and Scotland will rise again. For great John Mclean has come home to the Clyde. Hey, Mac, did you see him as he come down the Gorgie, or a war the Lammerlaw and north o' the Tay? Now yon man is coming, and the whole city's turning it. We're all sure he'll win back to Glasgow today. Great John Mclean's coming home to the Clyde. Oh, great John Mclean's coming home to the Clyde. Thank you. Two more. I get two more, Bob. I get two more. No, I get two more. Right. So that was by Hamish Henderson. The next two are Jim Mclean songs. Many will know Jim Mclean, written a load of great songs. This one, the Scottish MP. I am a Scottish MP from a city grey and black. So I'll shut my mouth when I'm in the south, just in case they send me back. Now some folks work for Labour and some for the Tory class, but I work like hell for me, myself, and the rest kiss my kilt. Oh, I'm off to London in the morning, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MB. Oh, Scotland, dear Scotland, you have given me your trust, and if I make the grade to the Board of Trade, just guess who I'll trade first. I'll trade the lowlands for a peerage, give me an earldom for the Isles, and the whole damn lot could be easily bought with one of Lizzie's smiles. Oh, I'm off to London in the morning, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MB. I am a Scots home ruler at my English Queen's command, for my real birthright is to be a knight, and the rest can be Republican. So come Wishart, Smith and Blackfoot, a Scottish Englishman. Nationality for a Scots MP means tea at number 10. Oh, I'm off to London in the morning, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MB. Thank you. And one more, quick one. We didn't want Polaris. I'll learn one of those ones for this. You'll know this tune, and please sing along, okay? The USA are giving subs away. They're giving subs away. They're giving subs away. The USA are giving subs away. But we didn't want Polaris. Tell the Yanks to drop them down the stanks. To drop them down the stanks. To drop them down the stanks. Tell the Yanks to drop them down the stanks. We didn't want Polaris. The Council ordering, they want their half a crown. They they want their half a crown, they want their half a crown. The council of Dunoon, they want their half a crown. We didn't want Polaris, the Harrys of the town, a sailing to Dunoon, a sailing to Dunoon, a sailing to Dunoon. The Harrys of the town, a sailing to Dunoon. But we didn't want Polaris, them on the Clyde. They hear them on the Clyde, they hear them on the Clyde. It's suicide to hear them on the Clyde. We didn't want Polaris. The Clyde says no, you'll hate to shoot the craw, you'll hate to shoot the craw, you'll hate to shoot the craw. The Clyde says no, you'll hate to shoot the craw. We didn't want Polaris. Tack the hill dam show up the river Alamo, up the river Alamo, up the river Alamo. Tack the hill dam show up the river Alamo. We didn't want Polaris. Anchors away to Papa Kennedy, to Papa Kennedy, to Papa Kennedy. Oh, anchors away to Papa Kennedy. We didn't want Polaris. The USA is giving subs away, they're giving subs away, they're giving subs away. Oh, the USA are giving subs away, but we didn't want Polaris. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Neil. Okay, our next speaker is Bill Ramsey from the SNP CND group, one of the groups that are supporting the demonstration today. In fact, the CND group and the SNP were the first apart from ourselves. So welcome, Bill. Thank you for supporting the rally. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm going to say a little bit what SNP CND is, and there's something I think that folk in other parties here, they could set up a similar organisation. SNP CND is actually an affiliate of Scottish CND. It's made up of people who have two membership cards, a membership card of the Scottish National Party and a membership card of a Scottish CND. We are involved in the work of Scottish CND, of course, but in an SNP context, we organise seminars, we organise speakers, and we provide papers, and all of this can be found on our website. And I encourage all of the other parties, such as ALBA and the Greens, to set up similar organisations within their parties. So there should be an ALBA CND and there should be a Green CND indeed. I'm not quite sure why the Greens haven't got round to organising one yet, but there's a lot of Green people who are involved in Scottish CND anyway. But I think it would be useful if they did that. The most important piece of work that SNP CND are involved in at the moment is the development of taking forward anti-nuclear policy within the SNP. 3 years ago, we got a motion accepted unanimously on a roadmap for trident removal. Now, that was based on the work, the peer-reviewed work actually, of the late John Ainslie, that many people here will know, and a great loss to the movement when John died a few years ago. And in September, the SNP are having its a September conference, and we have another motion on the SNP when SNP parliamentarians, SNP government, when we become independent, indeed whatever colour that government is, to ratify the Treaty on the Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. That's a really crucial development and a crucial step. Now, it might sound a bit technical, diplomatic, but it really is quite important. The TPNW came into force in January of this year. Over 50 countries, in fact there's about 80, 90 countries have got the process rolling, so to speak, before then. 50 odd countries so far have ratified it, and many more will be doing so over the coming period. And when Scotland regains its sovereignty,
one of the first things that a Scottish government should do, whatever the hue of the parliamentarians, they should be ratifying the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, because it provides a framework, a diplomatic framework, to see these abominations removed from Scotland. And the key aspect of it is, when a future sovereign Scottish government ratifies the TPNW, it will have the various institutions of the United Nations to aid it in its negotiations to get these things going. Organisations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, which, as some of you will know, is the key organisation that has been involved in nuclear disarmament and removal at various countries at various times over the past 20 or 30 years. So that really is quite important. Now, some people, I'm not sure, some of them jokingly, some not so, suggest that we should rent this place out to the remaining UK government for a tidy sum. This is a bad idea, and there are 3 reasons why it's a bad idea. 1, it's immoral, and it would send an awful message as to the standing, the moral compass of a new sovereign Scottish state. The second reason is that it would give succour to those who want to keep these weapons here after we become independent. Because one of the key things that people sometimes don't realise is, as you know, we've got 4 Vanguard-class nuclear submarines that carry the Trident missiles. And currently, right now, the nuclear agency, which is an agency that covers all nuclear weapons and such like in the UK under the UK government, they are building 2 replacements. They're going to build 4 in total. And one of them, the first of the Dreadnought class, is due to come here sometime in the next decade. Now, the sooner that the UK government get the message that we intend to see them removed, the sooner that they will take forward speedily their contingency plans to get them the hell out of here. Now, they're already working in those plans. They deny it, but they actually are. I attended a seminar of the Royal United Services Institute, the world's oldest military think tank, recently. And I put the question about contingency planning, because all navies do contingency planning for whatever units they've got, from the days of Nelson to today, right through it into the future. They do it. They'll deny it, but they do it. And if we give a picture, a clarity that they're going to go, then it will encourage them to speed up that process. But there's a final reason. When the people of England and the remaining UK, whatever manifestation that takes, when they realise that they're going from there, then they will start to have a serious discourse about what they're going to do with them. Because at the end of the day, they face a real challenge if they want to keep these abominations and their replacements, as Isabel pointed out. And it's important that they have clarity for us in Scotland, so they can have an open discourse about what they're going to do about them. Because as we know, and although I personally believe that Brexit was an exercise in self-harm, when the middle classes of the UK, told the English working class that their vote didn't count in Brexit, they get very angry. And that anger of those people underpins to some extent the political chaos of the UK today. And you see the delusion over Afghanistan at the moment, the performance in the House of Commons. It was an absurdity. Various MPs with petted lips and more trying to appeal to a strategy that they knew was not going to work. And I'm not criticising the poor Afghan soldiers that died in their thousands over these years. They are ordinary soldiers, and I'm not going to criticise them in the least. But these MPs, particularly the MPs who were of field rank in Afghanistan, some of their job was to negotiate with the so-called Afghan politicians, and they knew, as the Afghan papers, and you'd be worth looking up, going to YouTube and looking at it, they knew that it was a house of cards. So the idea that they are shocked is a lie. They knew it, and if you look at the Afghan papers published by the Washington Post, of all papers, strangely enough, you will see that. And one final point, because it is really important about what's happening in Afghanistan today. Bob was correct when he criticised my party in its initial position on Afghanistan, but in 2007, and I'll never forget it, round about March, Sophie Raworth came on the news, and the number 3 item was that the UK public and the public of Scotland and the whole of the UK had flipped and they wanted out. That was in 2007. I tried to get a motion in the SNP conference agenda that year, didn't work. Tried the same with STUC, didn't work. But then things changed and we got the motion in 2 or 3 years later, and with STUC, because and I'm a trade unionist, my colleagues within the trade union movement, I remember the first Sea Lord made a speech aimed at the workers in the armaments industry. They said, you can maintain the vehicles and equipment in Iraq, or you can have the carriers. You can't have both. And I knew when he made that statement, there would be no problem getting a motion to get the hell out of Afghanistan at the STUC, and so it proved. But anyway, thank you for listening, folks, and all the best. And I hope to see you here at future events to see these things out of our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Now we have independence campaigner Denise Findlay up to have a few words. Thanks, Bill.
Hello. He's going to adjust this. Yeah. So let's go back to 2014, and one of our big major slogans was "Bairns, not bombs." And that's what we were promising people. We were promising people what we spend our money on was bairns, not bombs. And people believed us. The working classes believed us. They marched, singing Flower of Scotland, pushing their bairns and their buggies to the polling stations to vote yes. Some of them were voting yes for the first time, in their lives. Some of them have never voted again. The most deprived areas of Dundee, they were full of yes votes. These boxes were boxes of hope. We'd sold them this hope. We sold them the hope of a better future for themselves and their bairns, and there would be no nuclear weapons in Scotland. What have we done since? What have we done to help the working class since? What have we done for these people that put their trust in the yes parties and the yes movement? Child poverty, 24%. 22% of absolute poverty. 68% in working households. That poverty is going to rise. 29% in 2023. By 2031, it's going to be a quite horrifying 38%. That's our bairns in our country, our rich country, with renewables, with oil and gas, with water, with an educated population, but we can't feed our bairns. Food bank use is up 80%. So what's our Parliament doing about this? What's the Scottish Parliament doing at this? They're begging Boris, begging Rishi Sunak for an extra few quid on universal credit. That's what they're doing about it. And what's our Scottish Parliament's equalities mechanisms? It's when did inequality stop being about poverty? When did equality become identity and not poverty. You know, we have equalities mechanisms that allow middle-class graduates to top lists, middle-class university graduates with degrees from private schools to top lists. These people are not disadvantaged, no matter how they ID. How many working class people do we have in the Scottish Parliament? Where's the equalities mechanism to get more working class men and women who came out of school of 16, who come from deprived areas? Where's those mechanisms to get them into Parliament? So while our Parliament muck around with middle-class virtue signalling, our people go hungry and our bairns go hungry, and we betrayed the people that stood up there, marched down to the polling station and put a yes for independence. And where are we on independence? Now is not the time. Since Theresa May told us now is not the time, our political leaders have been telling us now is not the time. Now is not the time if you're on a nice salary down in Westminster with your salary and your expenses. Now is not the time if you're on some list MSP for the Greens. Now is not the time because you're all comfortable. Now is not the time for you, but now is the time for Scotland. Now has always been the time. For the last 7 years, now has been the time. So what do? This is what we do. First, our political class is weak and corrupt, I have to say. I'm incredibly unimpressed by the MPs and the MSPs. We need to vote in people whose overriding decision is independence for Scotland. They have to stand on a manifesto of independence for Scotland. Once they're voted in, they declare independence, open negotiations with Westminster, and invite other countries to recognise us. The government have made it too difficult. There is no such thing as an illegal way to independence. There's no such thing as a gold standard to get independence. All you need to get independence is a democratic vote of a sovereign people, which they are. And this government is telling us, our government, our Scottish government, is telling us we are not sovereign. Right? They pay lip service to sovereignty. If they believed we were sovereign, they wouldn't be asking Boris Johnson for anything. They would be telling Boris Johnson. And it's time they started to walk their talk. We are sovereign. We don't need permission from any Westminster government. If we want independence, we will vote for independence and we will open the independence negotiations and we'll be independent, because all their scare stories, seriously, you know, Scotland is never, ever going to be a pariah state. If we want to be independent, the world will recognise us. So, that's it. Stop betraying the working class. Get more working class voices into Parliament. Stop begging Boris Johnson for stuff, because it's not in his gift, it's our gift, it's our decision, it's our country, it's our resources, it's our people, it's up to us what we want to do. So get rid of Trident while you're at it.
Thanks. Thanks very much to Denise Findlay. And now we're bringing on Brenda Eadie, for the campaigner for fair pay for the NHS and to protect the NHS. Thanks, Brenda.
Can I lower this a wee bit? Oh, sorry. So some of you may already know, my name's Brenda, and I have been actively fighting for the NHS grassroots campaign as an organiser. We started this campaign last year, and it originally started because other public sectors were awarded for their efforts during the pandemic, and us workers who were on the front line, hands-on, risking our lives every day, did not. We've been here to try and protect it from lining the pockets of the capitalists, namely Westminster. But that's all changed. Our fight has now changed. We're now campaigning for the survival of the NHS and for the survival of our jobs. It's being privatised even as I speak. All the big fat cats lining up, waiting to line their increase their bank balance on the back of your healthcare service. And I say our healthcare service because it is our healthcare service. We pay for that in our taxes. It is not theirs to sell. It is not theirs to profit from. And all that's going to do is bring death. That government are going to have blood on their hands, and it's blood of death of the people. There's already so much poverty in our country. Privatisation is only going to add to that. Heart patients unable to afford their medications on a monthly basis or their hospital visits or stays. Diabetics unable to access their life-saving insulin. Cancer patients unable to afford their life-saving treatments. It is, as I say, blood in the hands of the government. They get richer as we get sicker and we get poorer. And we all know the mess the Tories made during the pandemic. There was the PPE, the broken failed systems, and each and every one of them personally pocketed for that disaster. We need to put an end to all of that, because these people don't care about your NHS or us. They only care about themselves, and they will continue throwing curveballs until the NHS is completely unsustainable and it's gone and completely privatised. A wee bit about how that'll go. In America, if you need an ambulance, that's $5,000, £3,700. That's only your ambulance. Now, there's a wee story about an American boy who lost his job. He was insulin dependent, type 1 diabetic, couldn't afford his insulin, which was £1,200 a month. He's having to try and sustain his life on a £20 vial for Walmart. That's where we're going to end. The NHS was already on its knees before the pandemic. They were unable to fill the positions that were already there. And new staff are leaving in their droves, porters, healthcare workers, trained members of staff. The conditions for them and their patients are just continually unsafe and getting unsafer. Understaffed, well underpaid at 14.8% below inflation. That's like £20,000 below any other public sector worker. Yes, they gave us 4%, and on paper that looks really good, and on a good year that would be really good, but inflation is going up between 3.7 and 3.9%, so where is the rise to the workers for that? There's none, just like there hasn't been in over a decade. We're struggling to survive, and we need the support of the people to make the NHS thrive again. Then there's the issues of the migrants. They're asking all the migrants to leave. The NHS is made up a huge proportion of migrants. They send these migrants away who are phenomenal workers. And the NHS, if it doesn't collapse even quicker, it's going to collapse instantly when these people get sent away. We need to stop that too. We, as a grassroots team, got to meet Nicola Sturgeon a couple of weeks ago at the Govan Hill Festival. We got to tell her some of the issues surrounding the NHS from the inside and how could we go forward in protecting the NHS for the privatisation that's already happening. She said they will privatise the NHS over her dead body, and I believe her if it was up to her. But the power is not in her hands to protect that. Part of Scotland has already gone. She's agreed to meet us as a grassroots team to discuss these issues and how we go forward in protecting the NHS. So Nicola, if you're watching this, I really hope you are a woman of your word, because we're looking forward to this meeting with you. We need to stop the privatisation. We need to stop the underfunding. And we need to make the NHS a priority in recovering our wonderful country. Look where we're standing, in the middle of nuclear weapons that neither us nor our government want in our land. Sir Alba.
Hi everybody. Just a wee announcement as well to interject with some of the speakers. On the 31st of August at 1 p.m, Now Scotland are holding a rally at the Scottish Parliament the first day back. Use the mandate, set the date. So if you can get along there for the Scottish Parliament 31st of August, how many mandates do they need? Time to set the date and hold another referendum. Okay, all under one banner is a broad-based united organisation with voices from different parts of the movement campaigning for independence, and I would like to end the rally. Thank you, Lorna.
All right.
Oh, Jesus.
You're all right. Sorry. You okay? Yeah, there's a wee step ladder here.
Yeah, I know. It's because I never had a step ladder. My knees don't work anymore. Do you want to use that?
I'm all right, I'm all right. Thanks so much. And I just want to follow on from where Brenda left it. That was a really fantastic speech, Brenda. £205 billion is what is spent on Trident. That's the most recent figure, £205 billion. That is disgraceful. And it's especially hard to stomach after we just heard from Brenda, when we think about the last couple of years that we've all just had, when we think about what that money could have been spent on. The Tories apparently have £205 billion to waste and throw away on Trident, but nothing for Afghan refugees. What else could we buy with £205 billion? That could buy us money for the NHS, pay rises for frontline workers, council housing. The fact that we're investing money in things like Trident instead of things like these, that tells us something about the system that we live under, the capitalist system that they represent. It tells us that we live in a society and a system that puts profit and war before people. And that's why it's so important that we're all here today, because what a blow that would be to the Tories and their system if we broke up the British state with independence and started building a society that puts people before profit and war. A society without nuclear weapons. But what about the problems that we're facing closer to home? There's now a pro-independence majority with the SNP and the Greens alliance. So what does that mean for us in reality? Well, whether it's getting rid of Trident, fighting to address climate change, or achieving a second referendum, the Tories are blocking all of these things. And it's not good enough then for the Scottish Government to hide behind that. If they are serious about climate change and scrapping Trident, if they are serious about a second referendum, they have to defy the Tories. They have to disobey them and push forward. Yes. And if they're not ready to do that, then the pressure is going to have to come from somewhere else. It's going to have to come from us. We have to see more of what we've achieved today, people out on the streets, militant action, mass mobilisation, and take the fight to their doorstep and force them to face the music. Because if history's taught us anything, it's that any rights that we do have, they have had to be fought for. The women's vote, women's right to vote, the civil rights movement. Rights from these struggles were never handed down to us. They were fought for and won by ordinary people who demanded them. So we have to take inspiration from those struggles, I think, and demand the same here. And the last thing that I want to say is, in a world that's so deeply in crisis, we can't just postpone these changes that we want, postpone these struggles until after independence. Because it's not inevitable that independence will make a better society. It's about what we make of independence. It's about what kind of society we want to live in. And we're going to have to fight for that society. And that's why we can't wait. And it's why we have to fight in the here and now against racism, for the rights of migrants and refugees. We have to fight for radical action on climate change in the lead up to COP26. We have to fight for trans rights. And we have to say no to war and no to nuclear weapons. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to invite Alan Bell from Now Scotland to come up and address the rally now. Come on, Alan.
Hi everyone. It's good to see everybody here today. I know it's not as big as some people would have liked it to be, but we've got to remember that we are building a movement from the grassroots up again. And how many people are here today? Let's say roughly 200. The next demonstration is going to be bigger than that. The next demonstration is going to be bigger than that. So we're not going to be disheartened by anything like that. So what we're here today to talk about is we're standing outside Faslane nuclear base. As the last speaker said, £205 billion wasted on abhorrent nuclear weapons that only have the capability of mass destruction. These are not a deterrent. We saw what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We saw the destruction that was caused. We've seen what happens when a nuclear power plant in Japan got hit by a tidal wave a few years ago and the destruction to people's lives that caused. We don't need to spend the money on this. As speakers have said before, we want to take that money, we want to spend it on our NHS. We want to welcome refugees into this country. Look at the legacy of Afghanistan. We are part of that British legacy, so we need to break up the British state. We say no more nuclear weapons. We say welcome refugees into this country. We say build a better Scotland. We say support the NHS. We say make a welcoming country. We say stand against the Tories' climate of the hostile climate and climate of fear. If you've caused them refugees and migrants, you should be welcoming them into this nation. And today we stand outside Faslane. But I call for you, come on Tuesday outside the Parliament at 1 o'clock and call for them to set the date. And then from there, the next thing we need to do is we need to march to Dungavel, because that's an absolute shame to have that in our country. They said they would do something about it, but the government has done nothing over Dungavel. So we need to march there and say, we will not stand for people to be detained in our country who haven't committed any crimes other than being born in the wrong place. So I ask everyone here today, and this is a shameless plug, I'm from Now Scotland. Join Now Scotland. We're a grassroots, one member, one vote organisation, building from the ground up, because we need to win our independence. And we're not going to wait for a year. We're not going to wait for 5 years. We're going to do it now. We're asking to set the date next year, set the date the year after that maybe, but it has to come as quick as possible, because it will not come in 5 years from now. No chance to wait for things to happen. We've seen how the climate emergency has totally destroyed the country and it's destroying the world. And we need to realise and convince other people who have said that that's not part of the independence movement, that it's central to the independence movement. Because if we destroy the planet, we'll have nowhere to live and there'll be no point to independence. The last thing I'm going to say is we're fighting for a better Scotland. There's no point for independence for the sake of it. And that's why we're here outside Faslane. We are saying break up the British state. Get independence now, fight for a better Scotland, a more socialist Scotland, a welcoming country, and a country where we can have the democratic right to make the decisions that we voted for in our own parliament. So one last time, I'll say, join Now Scotland today. We need to realise the movement is slightly fractured, but I don't buy into any of that. There's no fractures for me. There's one case. The case is independence, and the case is to win it now.
Now introducing Tim Rideout from the Scottish Currency Group. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. In order to remove the disaster waiting to happen behind us, we obviously need independence. And that means winning the support of a majority of Scottish voters. The SNP leadership, and Mike Russell in particular at the moment, have things the wrong way round. There's no point campaigning without answers to the questions that the voters ask. So what I'm just going to do very briefly is I'm going to go through the main questions. I've been doing talks for 2 years, so I know what people ask. So firstly, let's take the easy one, pensions. The existing state pension is the lowest in Europe. And on independence, the Scottish Government should take that over, turn it into the Scottish Universal Pension, and implement existing SNP policy, which is to increase that to the EU average of £300 per week per person. What happens to private pensions? Well, nothing happens on independence. You have a contract with the pension provider, your employer, the insurance company, or whatever. So those will stay exactly the same. The question about the European Union. Well, there's a lot of nonsense talked about the European Union. It is simply not possible to just rejoin the European Union by saying, right, we want to rejoin and we'll be in tomorrow, because we won't. The Brussels will be very kind. They will fall over backwards to help us, but fast for Brussels means the negotiations will take 4 years. That would be a record for an accession. They're not going to bend the rules because Spain would not like that. The other applicants wouldn't like it. So the answer to the question, what do we do about the EU, is after independence, we have a referendum on whether people wish to apply to rejoin the EU. And I think the answer to that will be yes, which will trigger the 4 years of negotiations. In the meantime, what we can do on Independence Day is to join EFTA and get into the Norway position, which puts us back in Erasmus, back in the single market. It may well turn out that that would be the best position in the long run. The negotiations with the EU are not straightforward. We have the tricky issue of fish, for example. The EU requires 5% VAT on food and children's clothes and things like that, which we may not want to do. So long as we're in the EFTA position in the single market, that restores the ease of access to the EU, cures the trade problems. On the border with England, well, it's blatantly obvious that whatever ends up being the border between Northern Ireland and England will be exactly the same as the border between Scotland and England. So, you don't need to panic about it. We'll still be in the common travel area, so there'll be no customs, no passport controls. You can move freely. You don't need a work permit to work in England. Goods are going to be subject to some checks, unfortunately. That is the UK's choice. It's not our doing, it's theirs. And obviously, on my particular subject, currency. There's only one answer to this question, and that is we have our own currency as soon as possible. That means, for Andrew Wilson's benefit, a couple of months after Independence Day. I've got some of it here, which, when we were still able to do talks face-to-face, we could get the whole room to bring along some sterling and change it into the Scottish currency and then spend it at the bar or buy some of my maps. It's really not very difficult. If you want to find out more about the currency question, have a look at the reservebank.scot website. But it's basically very straightforward. We have something like 200 billion of sterling, which belongs to us and our companies, government, council, and so forth. We have about 130 billion of sterling debts, which we will probably repay. So that will be 200 billion coming into the Scottish pound, 130 billion going out to settle the old debts. That leaves the Scottish Reserve Bank holding 70 billion of foreign reserves, which was our sterling that we handed in. So anyone who says we have to go and save for 10 years to build up foreign reserves is talking out their rear end, because we don't. It's automatic. Anyone who wants to know more about currency, then, as I say, you can email me through the Reserve Bank website, or you can join the Scottish Currency Group on Facebook. So, lastly, in terms of the Scottish Government and the civil service, at the moment we only have 7,000 civil servants in the Scottish Government. Denmark has 50,000 core civil service positions. So that suggests that we are going to need a lot more civil servants to man the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, and all of these sort of things. I estimate something like 35,000 new jobs, and I've proposed, although I think we're going to have to wait for the November SNP conference, that those new jobs be allocated proportional to the population of each council area, with a 20% or more premium for any council which is currently deprived, rural or remote. So that would be, say, Inverclyde or Dumfries and Galloway or the Western Isles. You know, in the case of Dumfries and Galloway, that would mean 2,000 civil service jobs going to that area. So that's something of direct, concrete benefit to voters. They can see that that's going to be maybe a job for them, a job for one of their family, suppliers, contracts, all that sort of thing. So, independence means that everything changes, including what's behind us. So, what I would say to our MPs and the First Minister, tell people that. Don't try pretending that nothing's going to change and it all just stays much the same. Because if that's the case, there's no point having independence. Everyone instinctively knows that it's going to change, that we are going to have to shake up land ownership. We're going to shake up the Defence Force. All of those sort of things. So just tell people, be honest up front. They know it's going to happen. Sell it as hope and opportunity. And I think we can then easily win the referendum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Our next speaker is Daniel Muenge, climate change activist and anti-war activist. On you go, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Bob. Hi, I'm Daniel, and I'm with Stand Up to Racism, and we see that it's most crucial right now to build the anti-racist movement by tying in the anti-war movement for an independent Scotland free of nuclear arms. Nuclear weapons had first been developed as a 20th century Hail Mary that could wipe out inferior races, a fantasy enacted in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, like Alan mentioned earlier. It was only the 75th anniversary of marking that catastrophic humanitarian consequence of nuclear weapons earlier this month. Not only are the warlords in the British government in favor of nuclear arms, but they're actively making the decision to fund more nuclear weapons. As of 2020, the United Kingdom announced that it would increase its nuclear arsenal, and right now, with Brexit, the desire to re-emerge as a global Britain will mean shooting down any action on disarmament. Boris Johnson himself has openly shut down attempts of an independent Scotland that insists on the removal of nuclear weapons. This is why we must fight. This is why these people have no understanding of the human cost of nuclear weapons and war, because they're never on the receiving end of the bombings, and they're never on the front lines like our brothers and sisters sent to war, coming back home broken. And we can be a real thorn in the side of British imperialism to stop these ghouls in office who are building up the Trident program as we speak. It must be our fight to take this off their hands, and this could probably result in there being no nuclear weapons in Scotland and hopefully Britain. When Tony Blair was in office, he was a cheerleader for the Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan wars combined. And this was all built on lies, and we know that millions died. He's a war criminal, no doubt. We can't let these goons get away with talking about defense using warheads that cost billions to maintain, while they can't even defend our neighbors in this country against destitution, debt, poverty, homelessness, and illness. Right now, the Tories are spinning arguments against refugees coming to Britain, refugees who flee from the aftermath of Western intervention, and they claim that there's no room or not enough money to take them all in. That's nonsense. But these claims are false. Britain officially spent some £22 billion on the Afghan war, and other estimates put the figure at £40 billion. If there's money for military intervention, then there's money to welcome those who are made refugees by these wars. And there's money to support them, rather than forcing asylum seekers to survive on £5.69 per day. We've been lied to for the last 20 years, guys. We've seen the spillover effects, both humanitarian and economic costs. These wars were sold to us under the pretext of making us safer here at home. But obviously, these are lies to justify intervention. These wars aren't taken to foreign lands to help nation building, finding WMDs, or improving on human rights. Beyond these gates, guys. Let's fight for an independent and sovereign Scotland that follows the will of the people and not the warlords. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. We now have David Henry of the Scottish Sovereign Research Group. Welcome.
Didn't think that was going to work. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I joined the SNP just over 7 years ago and sadly left a few months ago after being disillusioned with no movement on independence. Since then, and during then, I joined a group which is now called the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group, a group of approximately 12 individuals, including 3 professors, all with experts in the Constitution. We presented to ALBA and to the SNP for the last election a manifesto for Indy, which was a simple 10-point plan based in law and effectively laid out a 10-piece process over a 2-year period. The one thing that we seem to be missing, we don't actually need a referendum. We've never needed a referendum. Scotland's sovereignty was established in 892 AD. I learned this from one of the professors. It's been reaffirmed many times since. What we do need is to present to the public and to voters a plan that makes sense. Over a period of time, over 2 years, we believe we should announce Scotland's sovereignty through the Scottish Parliament. That could be done now. Brexit changed everything. Brexit was against the will of the Scottish people. 62% of Scots voted Remain. They were ignored. There's been some great points made today, including a couple. We talk about a referendum. We disagree. You do need a referendum, but you don't need it at the beginning of the process. Ideally, what you do is you have it at the end, where you've told everybody exactly what the future holds. And then people vote. They either wish to continue to be independent or they decide to rejoin England. And we all know what that does. So the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group will publish a number of well thought through policy papers. We have professors from all over the world. We've been in touch with other countries. There is a ready and willingness to recognise Scotland's sovereignty and our independence. We just need the politicians to be able to stand up and take the difficult decision and make it happen. I believe what you're about to find out is the real cost of Brexit. I did a little bit of research on nuclear weapons. The current running costs of Trident is £1.6 billion per year. Scotland sends to the UK government £3.5 billion for defence. Only £1 billion of that is spent here in Scotland. We are subsidising the UK. The talk of a pension. I voted at the SNP conference in favour of raising the minimum pension, which of course it should be. It is quite correct. The UK has the worst, lowest state pension in the whole of Europe. It is not a success. It's a failure. How can we afford to increase the state pension is the question I had. And so I researched it. After independence, we won't be spending £3.5 billion a year on UK defence. We won't be spending £3.2 billion a year paying UK national debt, which, by the way, is now well past £1 trillion. So it's not a success either. You add up the savings, you can easily afford Scotland to have a state pension in line with the EU average. And it's true, rejoining the EU cannot be done quickly, but EFTA can. EFTA will get you the start of single market access, EFTA, EEA membership, and then it goes to a referendum where we can tell you exactly what the future is going to look like, or we can be run from London. Visit our website, manifestoforindy.com. You can download the documents, and we're engaging with all yes groups. Thank you very much.
Thanks to David for that. Our final speaker today is Ian Ramsey from the Society and League of Celtic Nations. I tried not to use the stairs, I couldn't even do it.
They keep all the big stars to the last. I was a person that painted the slogans down at the Holy Loch, telling the Americans to go home, we didn't need their nuclear weapons. And I'll tell you something, the British state at the time said, oh, we've made tests and there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. And of course, the local fishing fleet here, because I'm from across the river here in Greenock, and we had a fishing fleet, and they warned me. I was a candidate for the SNP at the time. They said, everything has died in the Holy Loch. All the shellfish, all the sea life has died. And this was what the British state was saying, oh no, no, everything's okay, no, everything's okay, no, and don't worry about it. And it was their word against the fisherman's word. Until the American retired, who was in the Hunley, the first sister ship that came across, he retired. Some people say he became a born-again Christian, and he therefore confessed that he had dumped nuclear material into the loch. And there was a dredger sat there for nearly 2 years getting all this crap out of the water. And Mr. Donald Duck, Commander, the man at the other side of this fence here, he's also dumping strontium-90 and tritium and a whole lot of other things that's hard to pronounce but is worse to take. What a cocktail he's putting into the water. And he said it's going to be 5 times more when the new submarine arrives. But he said it's perfectly acceptable. I ask him, who's it acceptable to? Certainly not to us. We have asked for test after test. They used to take tests down by Hunterston, where I want the test. There's a little open-air swimming pool right across the river here, where our children are jumping about, enjoying themselves in the water. That strontium-90 or whatever crap they call it is going to eventually go into that pool and give those children juvenile cancer. So what I'm saying to you, if you're listening, Mr. Commandant, Donald Duck or Donald Dewar or whatever your bloody name is, I will personally pay for your children to go into that swimming pool. If you say there's nothing to worry about, I will send us over a minibus full of your children and your grandchildren and all the other officers' children, and I will pay for them into the swimming pool if it's so safe. That's my challenge. Send your children, but I don't think you will, because you are hiding the fact that personnel on your side of the fence there are being retired off and being given good backhanders who have contacted cancer, including 3 young submarine. Now, this is being hidden from us. We want you to be straight and honest and tell us the truth. Scotland must have independence before we can get rid of you. That's obvious. I was for many years in Africa working, and I saw what the British state did before the First World War. And I have a photograph here of the concentration camps that the British invented. And I stood there, and as far as the eye can see, in a town called Krugersdorp in present-day South Africa, 23,000 women and children buried in graves because General Buller and Kitchener could not beat the Boer army, so they invented the concentration camp. And the Union Jack was what flew above those camps. Make no mistake about it. And that's when the British Empire started to fail, because they made war on women and children. And don't make no mistake about it, there's still plenty of dirty tricks up their sleeve. This is a target obtained from the KGB headquarters in Moscow. It's a red alert, and it shows Greenock and Helensburgh as being the target for the Russian retaliatory strikes. So we're living right in the middle of a bullseye. So if you're losing a bit of sleep, it's understandable, because you're living in a bullseye on a target which had been created, and London accepted it and gave it to us, gave it to Scotland, put it in the lesser populated area, they said. This is the most populated valley, the Clyde and Forth Valley, and the westerly prevailing wind would take fallout within 20 minutes to Glasgow. When I was in the army, I volunteered. I was only a stupid boy at 19, and I volunteered to go to Christmas Island. Christmas Island was where the British state were trying out the bomb. And all my pals, who have since died, were standing there with only a wee pair of shorts on, a pair of sunglasses, and to watch this explosion, which was only 11 miles away. But nobody had told them about nuclear fallout and radiation. Every one of my friends that went to that posting, and I was stupid enough to put my name on the list, and thank goodness I didn't get chosen. Every one of them died before they were 50. And they try to say that nuclear bombs or nuclear power is okay. Have they forgotten about Chernobyl? All the little children that have died since that used to play at Chernobyl. And you notice, of course, Chernobyl wasn't in Russia. Russia had built Chernobyl when they were in charge of Ukraine. Just the same as London, England accepts. And by the way, it's a case of, how would I say, they don't care about us. There's absolutely no way that they care about us. We must have independence and take our country forward. Alapagubra.
Ron is driving past, but thank you very much.
Hi folks.
And here comes Bob.
Here's our last speaker. We're going to get Lorna to sing a few tunes just to play us out, but I just want to end up by thanking everybody for coming today. I think it's been a successful rally. I think it's an important message that we've sent out today. Remember the slogan, "Bairns not bombs," welfare and education, not trident and deportation. You know, these are the messages, the positive messages we want to send out. A couple of announcements I need to make. Remember the Now Scotland
hello, would you like to have a quick interview? I'm Jem from Independence Scotland, Independence Live. So we're about the people being the media and not governments or organisations like the BBC and that. We're all about promoting the truth and promoting fair, unbiased media, so the true media. Can I ask why you're here today? That's very good. And what do you think, physical activism and protests are just as important or more important than social media? And did you make that yourself? Yep, we got her earlier. It's a very beautiful piece. Well, unfortunately, I think that's us about to wrap up soon, but thank you for doing your work here. Thank you for being a part of this protest and making a difference, okay? Thank you very much. My name is Jem. Nice to meet you. Jem. Nice to meet you. Hi, can I get a quick interview with you quickly?
A couple of yes, by one of my heroes, but I have to coordinate with my taxi.
Yep, no, that's fine. It will only take 2 minutes after you do that. Okay, I'll just.
Do you want to go down there?
Yep, that'll be great.
This is less. Less noisy?
Yeah, one sec, I just need to grab these people here to do a little quick interview, and then I'll meet you down there, okay?
Okay.
Hiya, are you able to do your interview?
I'm really sorry.
No, it's fine.
Do you want to speak to Daniel?
Yep, I can speak to Daniel.
First, and then I'll talk to you.
Excuse me, Daniel. Hi, could I get an interview with you quickly, just about you being a speaker? If you can't, it's fine.
I wanted to record Lorna.
Nope, that's fine.
I'll be right back.
Listen, it's fine. We're about to pack up anyway, but yeah. So, but I'm with Independence live streams, so.
Send bombs into space.
Let me just run and watch it.
Say that again?
Send bombs into outer space.
Well, I think it would be bad on the ozone layer as well if it was sent out. Maybe we should just get rid of them completely, if you know what I mean.
But how do we do that? It's the planet we live on.
Well, if they made a way to build them, there should be a way to get rid of them.
I don't think there is. I think maybe it's best.
Well, possibly, but we don't know until we try.
Exactly. T-shirt.
Thank you. Guys, could I ask you to keep on the pavement when you walk down the road? Thank you.
Okay, so this is Jem from Indie Live Radio, Indie Live Stream, Fiona's Indie Live Radio, and that's been all the interviewing we've done today. Feel free to reach out and, you know, get more interviews, engage with us and everything like that. We're here to promote difference for Scotland, we're here for Scottish people, we're here for Scotland's voices, okay? Thank you very much.
Now we're going to look at, I think, the most important aspect within our defence, security and protection, the idea of the nuclear weapons stroke trident that we currently have. So we've got a fantastic panel with us to cover that.